Welcome to the Homeschool Show for North Carolinians for Home Education. I'm Amanda Wayers, and my co-host is Melanie Willis. This is the second in our series about homeschooling when you're dealing with a chronic illness. That could be a chronic illness in yourself as the homeschool teacher, or another parent, or one of the kids is dealing with a chronic illness. I wanted to give a little bit of a serious content warning for this episode. Nothing is graphic or anything like that, but it is a little bit intense emotionally, and some of the content might not be appropriate for tiny ears. So just know that while you're listening. If you didn't catch our last episode, which was the first one in this series, please do that. It would be helpful and encouraging for you. All right, let's get started. Melanie, what do we have today?
So, as you've said, this is our second episode in the chronic illness series. And so today we listened to some conversations that you had with Diane Helfrich and with Jennifer Smith. And then we will have some homeschool news. So let's listen to those conversations.
I have here with me Diane Helfrich. Diane is NCHE's development director. She is also, obviously, a homeschool mom. She's graduated a couple kids from her homeschool, and she has some experience with dealing with chronic illness while homeschooling, dealing with some other hardships while homeschooling, as I feel like a lot of you out there do, and we don't talk about it enough. So that's the hope with this episode, that we're gonna get into it. So, Diane, tell us a little bit, just introduce yourself, reintroduce yourself for those out there that don't know you yet, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, as she said, my name is Diane. I have two kids that are both adulting now, and they have gone on to achieve higher degrees and good jobs and things. We homeschooled for 14 years, and we pulled my son out after second grade from the public system. My daughter never went to the public school.
So, Diane, share with our audience a little bit. I know you went through some health challenges yourself. Was that while you were homeschooling?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had a breast cancer ordeal, and when I was going through radiation, I developed some radiation necrosis. I had an infection that started in the irradiated area, and I had a 2.5-year journey with full body infections that landed me up at Chapel Hill. I'd be up at Chapel Hill for a week on massive IV antibiotics, and then I always had a port and came home for another 3 weeks on IV antibiotics. But for 2.5 years, every 3 months, like clockwork, it would come. I would go to the ER. They would look at me and say, "Wow, that's impressive." And they'd ship me off. And it was just, we were homeschooling then. And the other thing that was going on then is that we were in post 9/11 years. Now, it was not right at 9/11, but my husband is a Middle East analyst for special forces. And so the work that he had to do went on for years, well, until he retired. And he had very odd work schedules, very long work hours. So our family was very much out of balance in that period. And so you look back and you kind of wonder, how did we make it through that? And you make it through one step at a time, one day at a time. And then you look back and you say, you know what? I see where God was in a whole lot of places here. And you realize you're not doing this alone. And I had a phenomenally supportive homeschool group, a co-op, that brought us meals for months. I mean, you have a lot of expense that you don't know how you're going to cover. And so the blessing was not just the workload, it was the reduced financial load, even just a little bit. And my homeschool co-op was a true blessing in all of that. And I was so glad that we were part of one.
Yes. I know I've said it, I don't know how many times on this show. I've said it in real life to people. Find in real life support in your homeschool. I think that's one of the first things every homeschool family should do because you need your people, whether you're going through something that difficult or not, just day to day life, you need your people. But if you go through something that's that hard, that life changing, having that support system in place, just makes it more bearable almost. Like okay, these people will help you.
Okay.
That's a,
So there is a learning that comes from these seasons as well that you don't
yes.
get any other way. Your family binds together differently. Your prayer life changes. Your activities, your reliance on people change.
Mhm.
Those are important life lessons that come. And
Right.
I will not say we were perfect. There was some avenue in that we failed, and there are ramifications of that even today. That's okay too. We're all
Right.
on a journey, and we were never promised it was going to be easy, but we were promised that we would have help to go through.
That's beautiful. So true. And so I know that there was another season of hard in your homeschool that was particularly difficult. And I have experienced a season of real serious mental health issues with one of my kids. And I think it's a little bit different, but it does affect things similarly to a chronic illness or different things like that. So, yeah, just share whatever
Yeah.
you feel comfortable sharing about that.
Actually, it wasn't a different season. It was right in the middle of the breast cancer season.
My,
And
oh,
I was up in um, there had been some things changing with my daughter that we didn't quite understand. Her
mhm.
personality was changing. She was, some of it I attributed it to she was 12 going into 13. And, there's a lot of adolescent puberty and adolescent things going on there. But I was up in Chapel Hill with one of my infections and I got a call from my son and he said, Anna's been arrested on post. What do I do? What do you do? I said, get your father up. He was working strange hours, but I wasn't home.
Mhm.
He needed to get his dad up. What had happened is that we learned that Anna had been sex trafficked for about a month, and it was actually someone from our church that had trafficked her out to Fort Bragg. And this was a soldier picking her up for another round. It was rounds. So here I am thinking that there's this friend who keeps calling saying, can Anna go to a movie with me? Can Anna go do this with me? And I'm thinking, life hasn't been very fun. This is such a blessing. It wasn't. She was taking her out to post to be um, assaulted by many people. And it was a really
Wow.
brutal time. But how do you know that the arrest is bad? The arrest broke the cycle. And then she tried to commit suicide. And how do you know that that's bad? It connected us to a doctor who connected us to doctors up in the Chapel Hill area. And we ended up with a psychiatrist that gave us our daughter back. But I look back and I go, how did we get through all of this? But I think the gifting really was, the community of support, but it wasn't just looking at the big picture all the time. It's what do we have to do today? And that was enough. And then
Beautiful.
there's tomorrow, and tomorrow may be a different day.
Right. Exactly. First of all, just my heart goes out to you. I cannot imagine. I think what a blessing that you were homeschooling in that season. Because if they had been in school, in brick and mortar school, it would have been a very different experience. I mean, your family dynamics would have been different. Your family relationships would have been different. The interruption in any kind of education would have been very different. And you wouldn't have had that time to go and seek that intense counseling that was needed.
Right.
It would have been very different.
Well, we wouldn't have been able to travel 4 or
Right.
3 times a week, we wouldn't have had the study time with my son. We wouldn't have been able to make it work, and when I think about the compromise we would have had to make in her mental health care, which was crucial. She'd been through a lot. She was very, very angry, very broken.
Uh-huh.
We were able to do it because we homeschooled and we had the freedom to take our school with us, to not do it today because we're a mess. We had the freedom to make it be what we needed to be.
Yeah, exactly. So during that season, did you pretty much continue on with academics? Like, did you try to maintain as much of a structure as you could, or did you kind of let it go? What did you do to handle that in that situation?
We relied heavily on the co-op. We were
Mhm.
doing things like speech and debate, so we
Yeah.
kind of lived into that a little bit and didn't worry about some of the other things as much because it was such a broad experience that she really liked. There's another side of this that I want to caution people about a little bit.
Mm. Yeah.
Some of the really hard stuff that we had to go through came from gossip at our church and in the homeschool community. And in our homeschool community, while they were supportive of me with the cancer, with Anna, there was a view that she was a bad girl.
Mm.
People talked all around and talked to each other, and only one mom approached me and said, "What's going on?" And the
Yeah.
same thing was true at church, only nobody approached me at church. And what I will say is if you see a child that is suddenly going dark, that is suddenly changing attitude, is suddenly not seeming like the happy, joyful child that you knew, you need to go to the parents and you need to say, "I've noticed, is something going on? I don't want to poke into your business, but is something going on? Is there some way that I can pray for you? Is there some way I can help?"
Yeah.
Because the gossip from friends and friends pulling apart was almost more damaging than the really awful events.
Wow.
Sorry, I get
Yeah.
a little emotional there, but that was really
No,
hard.
it is. It's so hard and it's so important because I know I feel like this sometimes. You don't know what to say. So either you don't say anything or you don't say anything to the person, even if, well,
Yeah,
gossiping is never okay. But sometimes people have this ignorance that they feel like, oh, it'll hurt more if I go directly to them. No, go out of your love and care
yeah.
for that person, for that child,
I'm
and
sorry.
just say, no, you're fine. And just
Um,
say, how can I help?
and so the other thing that I would say is, but you've all heard this before, but just be kind because you don't know what other families are going through. So, and
Yep,
share that you have a concern for the family. So,
that's good. Good wisdom. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and transparent for us.
well, can I say one more thing in ending?
Yeah, please do.
Human trafficking is now the second largest industry in the world next to illicit arms trade. One out of every 5 women will have had some kind of an experience. So the people sitting around you are having these experiences. So don't be afraid when you have an inkling that something's not right to just go put your arms around that person and walk with them a little bit.
Thank you. Right. I am here with Jennifer Smith, and we are talking chronic illness today. Will you please, for our audience, those who might be new, just introduce yourself briefly, and then you can share your journey with any kind of chronic illness and homeschooling.
Absolutely. So, if you don't know already, I am actually the marketing director with NCHE, and I have a very interesting chronic illness story. This kind of started actually before I was homeschooling. So, I know I've shared kind of different times, and some people have heard different pieces, but it actually began when my youngest I was birthing her, and I had a very extreme situation, to the point where I had like 19 units of blood within the surgery. So that can kind of just give a perspective of how grievous this was. And I crashed and all sorts of things happening. And I was put in the ICU, and I guess the whole process for me in the hospital was like over 10 days. And then I was able to
Mm.
go home with my baby girl. Now, in the meantime, I had two other children. My two other kids were older, obviously, and they had to stay with their grandparents during this time. So it took me probably a couple of months before they were able to even come home. So I was separated from my kids. And I bring that up and
Mm.
wanted to go back to that at the beginning, is to talk about like the connections that you make with your kids through homeschooling. That's just so, to me, so much different because you spend so many more hours. And why, when you are dealing with chronic illness with yourself or your child or even your spouse. My husband actually deals with a condition, and it's something that's unique in that he's lived with it his whole life. We didn't know until we were well into our marriage that he even had this until he was diagnosed. But
Mm.
it's just kind of put this extra layer of things. So I recovered actually fairly well. But about 2 years later, I have a 2, 4, and 6.5 year old at this point, and we're full on to homeschooling with my oldest, and now I'm bringing the other ones up, and I actually started to crash even worse in my health. This is where it got really, really challenging, and I developed a chronic illness condition through all of this that really, the doctors sometimes don't even have answers. If you've got that kind of story, you probably can relate that it's like, I was trying to figure out why I couldn't even get out of a chair. I couldn't run around with my kids. I couldn't keep up with the energy of it. And so at this point, I had, a lot of well meaning people saying, oh, well, just put him in school and preschool, it'd be so much easier for you. And, but I felt compelled that the Lord was really, wanted me to homeschool my kids. And I'm
Mhm.
actually second generation homeschool mom. And I had only done high school. So here I am, brand new, brand new
Yeah.
mom, three kids back to back to back, trying to school, trying to do all these things and being like, no, I really feel like I need to do this, but having like no understanding of how this was going to happen, but a bit of faith, really, Amanda. So that's kind of a little short synopsis.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind that I think our watchers and listeners will want to know is, how did you do that? As your health is crashing, you're homeschooling these little kids. How did you make that work?
Well, I think at first it was really survival mode. And if anybody has dealt with any kind of life crisis, it can even be a loss of a family member, anything where you just kind of go for a time in that survival mode. And,
Yeah.
for a lot of weeks, it was just, it was excessive. We could read some stories, if we could just do one lesson. It really started that simple. In that
Mhm.
I just took the little wins
Mhm.
and trying to figure out who we were as a homeschool family amidst this, which I think was interesting because when you have, for mine, it was, a very life threatening situation. So you kind of come up with a different perspective of life
Yeah.
in general. So here I am trying to amass myself and find myself again in all of this because I'm now like I can't see things the same way. I almost died and I could
Yeah.
have not been there with my children. So I had this great respect for, what I had walked through. And then this huge reward that now I have the opportunity to be there with my kids like every day and even more so, because I homeschooled. And so
Mm.
having to put it back in my hands being that I had to learn how to balance. So then the support became, how do I get people to handle other things on my schedule, help with cleaning, or my mom would cook meals on some days when I had rough days. My husband would run the errands more. Once we had Walmart pickups and deliveries now, I mean, it's fabulous that those things exist. So it's kind of figuring out the formula of your condition or your child, the decision to say, okay, what are the things that limit us? So if it's mobility, how do you create
Mhm.
a classroom for months? I sat in the same chair with a basket of all the books and school lessons right next to me and the literature that we did. And I didn't really teach from anywhere else. And then once I got stronger, I was able to go outside with them and things. That was wonderful. But it could be something like that. If it's more mental things that you're dealing with or coping with, say you get a lot of headaches from the condition or something like that. Again, I've dealt with that as well, where it was really hard to like focus. Then you've got to figure out I got audios to do the learning for me, teaching for me, if you will. So like they would listen to a book instead of me reading it to them. And I'm like, here, go sit down and listen to this, and then we'll talk about it. So it just took some strain off of me. And then organizing was an important thing too, because if anything, taking the time, which I know all moms struggle with this, is forcing yourself to take that time outside of doing all the things, and making the meals and doing all this stuff, but sitting down at some point, at least a couple times a year, and like just going over your plan and then reassessing your plan and then probably redeveloping your plan because you figure out what works and what doesn't work while you're battling whatever it is that you're dealing with. And I know it sounds crazy because you're like, how can you do that? But I think goes back to the commitment.
Yeah.
If you're committed to being that in your kid's life, you'll figure it out.
Yeah. That is so wonderful. I love those practical tips and just the encouragement of, your commitment, and this is your calling. So just because you're dealing with these other things, it doesn't negate that, right?
Faith in carrying yourself through it and whatever that is for you. For me, it's, the Lord is really, Jesus Christ has gotten me through a lot of terrible times. But whatever that is too, is to remember that you're part of the homeschool journey as much as your kids. So whether it's your child or yourself dealing with the illnesses, that taking care of yourself in whatever way that has to be in that is keeping that strong. It's like keeping the priorities. And those things come across to the kids. I think that's the success that I have with my children all these years later, is that I think they understand well that, there's reading, writing, arithmetic, but that's really secondary to all of the life lessons they had to learn through everything we did in our homeschool. The experiences that we had, and in our case, was dealing with these types of things amidst our life. It kind of made them tougher, more focused, more able to know what they're doing. And it was hard in moments. It was really, really hard. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of moments where I was just like, you wanted to give up, but my heart knew what I want with my kids in that. And I was like, no, in the end, I know that this will turn out okay. Keeping that positivity of that and the people around you helping with that too.
So encouraging. I know that our people out there who are watching or listening to this will be so encouraged by what you've shared. So I really appreciate it. Do you have any last words? Anything else you want to say?
Just know that you know the best for you and your kids. I always like to say that you know in your heart what you're supposed to do. You know your children, you know what they need. No matter if you're homeschool mom or not, I think all moms can really relate that they really do, but they lack confidence, I think, Amanda, and especially in these tougher things that they can do. And I don't believe like you can do all things. Like I was talking about the practicality of some of the things you can do. But I do think that when you keep the important things important, you can do anything as a mom.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah. I never cease to be amazed at what people have been through. And sometimes you never would know, and the blessing, the point of this series is really to encourage all of you out there, all our watchers and listeners, all our homeschool families, that you really can homeschool through anything. And it really almost always is better. It almost always is of benefit to homeschool through those hard times, because it does give you that time together as a family, gives you time and flexibility to heal together, to, pursue whatever, if it's a medical thing that you need to do, if you need to homeschool from your bed, literally, or from the chair, it can be done. And to come out on the other side of that, in both of these cases, we know these people personally and they have come out on the other side of some really hard situations. And it was a blessing to them to be able to homeschool through it. And it's a blessing even now to see how close their families are and just all the results of all of that.
Yeah, I think, last time in our last episode, we talked about just the absolute needing to totally stop and take a break, and that we do continue to learn through life. But I know for my family, which we'll talk a little bit about next week, during a lot of the seasons that we went through, that maintaining just a shred of homeschooling did keep a little bit of a schedule in place and a little bit of connectivity for the family in place. And I think that it can be kind of an anchor through the rough times, that there's still some type of consistency happening there. Although I totally understand, there's times where we just have to say, no, we can't do it right now. And that's absolutely okay. Yep.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and go into some homeschool news. Let's hear what's happening.
Hello, this is Matthew McDill, NCHE Executive Director with your homeschool news. Just want to let you know first that there are a few tickets left for the Charlotte Ballet Nutcracker, which is on December 17th. So if you're interested in that, you want to go ahead and grab those. We also have the NCHE Day at the Charlotte Hornets. They're going to be playing the Wizards. And in addition to the game, there's a concert and other special activities for the kids. That's going to be on January the 24th. You can go to nche.com/activities and get more information on both of those events. Some other important news is that the Thrive Conference webpage is now updated for 2026. That's going to be May 21st to the 23rd. And you can go there and read all about our featured speakers. In January, registration will be opened up, so you can look forward to that and jumping right into some early registration. nche.com/thrive. You can read all about that. Finally, I just want to let you know that I got together with a friend of mine, Nancy Manos, who is leading the National Homeschool Day of Prayer. I just want to share a little conversation I had with her about that.
Hello, we are so excited. The 8th annual National Homeschool Day of Prayer is coming up Friday, November 7th. My name is Nancy Manos, and I volunteer with the National Alliance of Christian Home Education Leadership, which we call the Alliance. And I'm the coordinator for National Homeschool Day of Prayer, and I'm here with Matthew McDill. And Matthew is the executive director for North Carolinians for Home Education. Is that what it is? NCHE, and also the new chairman of the Alliance. And so we're here to invite you to join us for National Homeschool Day of Prayer. So Matthew, why should we be praying together?
Right. Well, I'm so glad we're doing this. Nancy, I appreciate you and Tara and so many others helping lead this over the years. And we believe in prayer. I mean, the fact that Alliance, representing so many Christian homeschool leaders and so many homeschool parents, believe in the Lord, believe that God is listening, that He wants us to ask. And so many times we don't ask. So it's the power of prayer. It's the power of praying together, not just by ourselves. He promised extra power in unified prayer.
Yeah, it's going to be a great day. I love this every year. It's homeschool families from across North America. So the Alliance is a network of statewide Christian homeschool organizations from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And it's this network of organizations and leaders that are here encouraging you to pray. And so some of the things that you'll get to experience on National Homeschool Day of Prayer is every hour, at the top of the hour, we'll have a prayer prompt starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. So it'll be a topic that we focus on for that hour. It might be gratitude or wisdom or provision or for our elected officials. So lots of different topics. We are so thankful for the freedom to teach our children at home. I homeschooled my kids all the way through high school, and Matthew is homeschooling with his wife, Dana. And so it's an honor and a joy. And a privilege to have the freedom. And then we have this 75-page activity guide that's a free digital download on the Homeschool Freedom website, and we'll share that where we post this video. But you can get your free copy. Just sign up for the Homeschool Freedom email list. And this is a great way to stay in touch with your statewide homeschool organization, get connected with them, hear about events coming up and things like that. But we will not spam you. We will not flood your inbox with emails. We just want to give you this activity guide, and it has tons of great things. So some of the pages include prayer prompt worksheets that go with each of the topics, a coloring page that goes with each of the prayer prompt topics. There's puzzle pages and activity pages and tons of great ideas for things that you can do as a family, whether it's you and your kids or you and your grandkids, you and your co-op, your homeschool friends. So those are some of the highlights. Matthew, in closing, what else would you like to say about National Homeschool Day of Prayer?
Well, the heart of homeschooling, of course, is to teach our kids and to disciple our kids. And how cool is it to pray together? In other words, this is a teaching moment. Don't just do it yourself, do it with your kids. And of course, that's what's so great about the activity guide, because if you homeschool your kids, you know that a lot of times they're going to have to be coloring or doing something while you're trying to teach, right? And so it's a perfect opportunity to discuss and be engaged in something and be praying and talking about the Lord. So what a great teaching opportunity and what a great tool to use.
That's fantastic. It really is. And you can use, you don't have to do all of the pages or all of the prayer prompts in one day. This could be something that you use for weeks. Make the activity guide your own. Find the pages that you want to do. I love that. I love getting the kids involved. It's not just something you go off and do by yourself, but we get to model that for our kids. Did I mention special guests praying throughout the day? Watch the Homeschool Freedom Facebook page for guests to pray throughout the day as well. And both Matthew and I may pop on separately during the day and just pray with you and encourage you. And so we're really looking forward to it. And we would love for you to join us on Friday, November 7th for the 8th Annual National Homeschool Day of Prayer.
All that sounds really exciting. And just always continue to check the website for all things new that's going on. And especially, we've told you that the Thrive page is up and running so that you can go ahead and be looking at everything that's going to be happening. And while you can't buy tickets yet, there's still so much to look at and so much to be thinking about as you plan your visit. Because as you've heard me talk about many times in the past, just last year, planning for it really does help it to go a little bit smoother, because it can be so overwhelming to see all these things thrive when you're just there on the spot.
All right. Is that all we have for today? So everybody, as always, please subscribe, share with your friends. Like I said last week when we started this series, we all know people that are going through hard situations. We know people who are homeschooling with a chronic illness or with a child with a chronic illness or a traumatic situation. Please share this episode, this series with them. I think it could really encourage them and help them. Always, I feel like it's so helpful to know that we're not alone. There are other families that have walked this path ahead of us and come out on the other side. So I think that's super encouraging. It is to me. I hope it is to you. And I hope you will share it with other people, that it could encourage them as well. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please send them to us. We do read every single one. You can send those to thehomeschoolshow@nche.com. And as always, keep homeschooling with confidence and joy. Until next time, bye-bye.